Hello and welcome to A Spirited Debate. I'm Lauren Green. Science and religion have been at odds for the last few decades, but a growing number of scientists are finding that science and faith may be much more compatible than we ever thought. For example, the Big Bang Theory explains the origins of the universe. Well, how does this reconcile with the words of Genesis, and God said, "Let there be light"? Here with some insight is former test astronaut and Hubble telescope engineer Leslie Wickman. She is the author of God of the Big Bang, How Modern Science Affirms the Creator. Welcome.
Thanks, Lauren. It's nice to be here.
Well, I've got to ask you about the Big Bang Theory because I'm calling it a theory, and most people thought it was settled science. Is it or is it not settled science?
Well, science is never fully settled. Scientific method uses the inductive process, so I think there's this kind of general misconception that science proves things, but the reality is that we're looking for the best explanation given the evidence that we have so far, and that's kind of the way science progresses. So there's a large amount of evidence for the Big Bang, but science is never fully settled.
So can the Bible's account of creation be reconciled with what science tells us about how the world began?
I think it absolutely can. I think we need to understand that the primary message of the Bible is theological rather than scientific. And the reality is, if you think about, if the biblical writers had been somehow inspired to write in terms of modern science that we know today, and talking about dark matter and dark energy and all that sort of thing, it would have been a completely irrelevant message to the people of the day, and maybe even looked at as magic or something like that. So the reality is that the Bible contains a primarily theological message and shouldn't be looked at as scientific.
So why this conflict between science and religion, and how can you reconcile the two, with the Bible's account, which is basically theological, and scientists, what scientists can tell us through their scientific proofs? Right.
So, as I said, we need to keep in mind that the Bible's message is theological. This perceived conflict or illusion of conflict between science and religion is primarily perpetuated by what I would say are fundamentalists at the extreme polar opposites of the dialogue. And, people that are so completely entrenched in their positions. On one hand, you have religious fundamentalists who think that the Bible may be a science textbook and can be interpreted from a purely American or Western 21st century perspective. And then you have people at the other extreme who I would categorize as atheistic fundamentalists who think that there is no room for God in the picture at all. And unfortunately, I think as in with many dialogues, the people at the extremes often have the loudest voices. But there's a lot of room in the middle for dialogue between the two. And the more that we look into both biblical interpretation as well as the science, we see a perfect combination.
Now, you've peered into the heavens from the Hubble telescope. Are we alone in the universe? And if we are not, does that sort of alter how we view the Bible?
That's a really interesting question. And first of all, I don't think the Bible tells us anything about whether God created life elsewhere. And, secretly, I kind of hope, well, I guess it's not a secret anymore, but I kind of personally hope that there is life out there somewhere else. If God created life here on Earth, then he certainly could have done it elsewhere. And again, I don't think that it changes our view of who God is as a creator.
There are a couple of books, there are a lot of books out there, but a couple that bring to mind. We've got a book by Marius Forte called The Answer, Proof of God in Heaven, another by Daniel Epperson, The God Element, Moving Beyond Scripture. Can science ultimately prove or disprove the existence of God?
Well, that's another good question. I keep coming back to science. It's really not about proof, Lauren. In science, and properly applied, science is looking for the best explanation given the evidence. Science can disprove things, but they have to be within the realm of nature. And so I would say that, science is not something that we should look to either prove or disprove God. But I do believe that scientific evidence in terms of, first of all, with the Big Bang, saying that the universe had a beginning point. That means that there had to be a beginner, some sort of cause. There are other features of the universe, the fine-tuning of the universe. Everything has to be just exactly right to get life. And it's very improbable that those things would end up just exactly as they are randomly. In fact, some people have made lists of these parameters that have to be finely tuned and calculated the probabilities of them all coming into existence concurrently. And the odds are somewhere in the order of 1 chance in 10 to the 280th power.
Wow.
And to bring that number into perspective, it's like one person buying just one ticket each time they play the lottery and winning every time they play, twice a week, every week, for 50 years in a row.
Wow.
So you look at that and you realize very quickly that that's not going to happen unless it's quote-unquote rigged, right? So that's pretty powerful evidence in my mind. There are arguments against that, saying that, well, maybe we live in a multiverse, which would be an infinite number of additional universes, and so our universe is then the only one to get all the numbers just exactly right. But the reality is that even the multiverse hypothesis says that there have to be physical laws in order to have those numbers. Placeholders for those numbers.
So we're all lottery winners in effect.
Yes, exactly. We're very, very lucky people.
Leslie Wickman, thanks for joining us. The book is called God of the Big Bang. Thanks for joining us. Have a good day.